October 1943. A railyard outside Murmansk, Soviet Union. The boxcar doors screech open and freezing Arctic air floods in like a blade. Soviet soldiers, Red Army infantry who spent 3 months pushing back Wehrmacht divisions through birch forests and burned villages, squint into the pale northern light. They're exhausted, filthy. Half of them are wrapped in German coats they pulled off corpses because Soviet supply lines couldn't keep up. An American officer stands on the platform. Clean uniform, well-fed face. He's gesturing toward a warehouse. "Rations," he says through a translator. The Soviets shuffle forward, boots crunching on frost. Inside, wooden crates are stacked floor to ceiling. American flags are stenciled on the sides. One soldier, a sergeant named Dmitry Volkov, pries open the nearest box with his bayonet. He pulls out a tin can. Spam. He turns it over in his hands like it's some kind of joke. The label shows a piece of meat, pink, gelatinous, absurd. Another soldier pulls out a loaf of something wrapped in wax paper, white bread, soft, spongy. It compresses under his thumb like a pillow. Someone laughs, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire platoon is howling. One private holds up the spam tin like a trophy, shouting something about American delicacies for pigs. Another pretends to use the white bread as a sponge to clean his rifle. The laughter is bitter, sarcastic, the kind of humor soldiers develop when they've eaten boiled nettles and called it soup. Volkov shakes his head. He's fought from Stalingrad to here. He's seen men chew leather belts for protein. He's watched a commissar execute a soldier for hoarding a potato. And this ridiculous canned meat and cake bread, this is what the Americans think will win the war? He tosses the spam back into the crate. "Decadent garbage," he mutters. The translator hesitates, but the American officer just smiles. He doesn't argue, he doesn't defend the rations. He just points outside, toward the harbor. "You'll want to see the rest." Volkov doesn't care about the rest. He's cold, he's hungry. He wants real food, black bread, kasha, something that sticks to your ribs, not this capitalist nonsense. But orders are orders. He follows the American outside, still grinning at the absurdity of it all. The other soldiers trail behind, passing the spam tin like a comedy prop. One of them makes a joke about trading it to the Germans for real sausage. They walk down toward the docks. And then Volkov stops. He stops so suddenly that the man behind him nearly crashes into his back. The harbor is full of ships, American Liberty ships, dozens of them, and they're unloading, not food, trucks. Rows and rows and rows of trucks, Studebaker US 6s, 2.5-ton cargo haulers, painted olive drab, still gleaming with factory freshness. They're rolling off the ships in a steady mechanical procession, engines rumbling, exhaust smoking in the frozen air. Dock workers are driving them into formation, 10 across, 20 deep, 50 deep, 100 deep. Volkov's jaw goes slack. He's never seen this many vehicles in one place, not in his entire life. The Red Army moves on foot, on horses, on broken-down GAZ trucks that need to be push-started every morning. He's watched entire artillery batteries get abandoned because there was nothing to tow them with. And here, the Americans are unloading trucks like they're unloading potatoes. One of the soldiers beside him whispers something. Volkov doesn't hear it. He's counting. 1 ship, 2 ships, 5 ships, all unloading trucks. And in the distance, more Liberty ships are on the horizon, scheming toward Murmansk with more cargo, more vehicles, more of this impossible American abundance. The translator catches up, slightly out of breath. "Lend-Lease," he says. 400,000 trucks, maybe more. They're sending them to motorize your divisions. Volkov finally finds his voice. 400,000? The translator nods. Volkov looks down at the spam tin still clutched in his hand. He's not laughing anymore. The numbers don't make sense. Volkov has been in the Red Army since 1941. He's seen the entire Soviet war machine up close. The factories in the Urals pumping out T-34s, the ammunition plants running triple shifts, the women and old men working themselves to death in the name of the motherland. He knows what industrial output looks like. And this is something else entirely. He walks closer to the docks, weaving between columns of trucks. An American mechanic is shouting instructions in English, pointing at engine blocks, checking tire pressure. The Studebakers are still covered in protective grease from the factory. Some of them have the inspection tags still dangling from the mirrors. Volkov reaches out and touches one. The metal is cold, solid, real. Not a propaganda poster, not a commissar's promise, an actual truck, brand new. And there are hundreds of them just in this shipyard alone. A Soviet logistics officer, a captain named Leonid Sokolov, is standing nearby with a clipboard, watching the unloading process with the expression of a man who's just been told the laws of physics no longer apply. "How many?" Volkov asks him. Sokolov doesn't look up from his clipboard. "This shipment? 1,200 trucks. Last week it was 900. Next week they're saying 2,000. From where?" "Detroit, Pittsburgh, factories we've never heard of." Sokolov finally looks at him, and his eyes have that hollow gleam of someone who's had to recalculate everything they thought they knew. "They're building these faster than we can distribute them." Volkov does the math in his head. 1,200 trucks per week, 50 weeks a year. That's... He stops. The number is too big. It doesn't fit inside his understanding of how war works. In the Red Army, you fight for every scrap. Every bullet is accounted for. Every liter of fuel is measured. He's seen rifle companies share weapons. One man shoots until he's killed, then the next man picks up the gun. That's how the Soviet Union fights, through blood and sacrifice and the willingness to pay any price. But this is a different kind of war. This is a war where the enemy doesn't just outfight you, they outproduce you. They bury you under an avalanche of steel and rubber and gasoline until resistance becomes mathematically impossible. Sokolov must see something in Volkov's expression because he almost smiles. Wait until you see what else they're sending. He leads Volkov down the dock, past the trucks, toward another cargo ship. This one's unloading crates marked with different labels. Sokolov pries one open with a crowbar. Inside, radio equipment. American SCR 536 handheld transceivers. Dozens of them, packed in foam, each one worth more than a Soviet infantryman makes in a year. Another crate? Boots. Thousands of pairs of leather boots, far better quality than anything Soviet factories are producing. Another? Field telephones, medical supplies, tents, blankets, canned food. Not just spam, but fruit, vegetables, milk powder, coffee. Real coffee. Volkov picks up a tin of it, reads the English label he can't understand, and smells it through the sealed metal. He hasn't had real coffee since before the war. The Soviet substitute, roasted barley and acorns, tastes like dirt and bitterness. "They're sending this every week?" he asks. "Every week," Sokolov confirms. "Through Murmansk, through Vladivostok, through Persia. Thousands of tons. And it's not just supplies." He walks Volkov to the edge of the dock and points south toward the rail lines. Trains. Freight trains stretching back toward the horizon, loaded with American equipment being shipped south toward the front lines. Volkov can see aircraft parts, wings and fuselages for fighters and bombers. He can see artillery pieces. He can see aviation fuel and massive drums stacked 3 high on flatbed cars. "They're keeping us alive," Volkov says quietly. "The Americans, the British. Without Lend-Lease, we'd still be fighting with Mosins and horse carts." Volkov wants to argue. He wants to say that Soviet courage matters, that ideology matters, that the Red Army is winning because of superior tactics and the righteousness of the socialist cause. But he's staring at 1,200 trucks that didn't exist 3 weeks ago. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a darker thought is forming. If the Americans can do this for the Soviet Union, if they can manufacture abundance on this scale and simply give it away to an ally, what are they doing for themselves? What does their own military look like? He thinks about the Germans, the Wehrmacht soldiers he's captured and interrogated. They talk about American bombers the way children talk about monsters. Fleets of them, hundreds at a time, turning German cities into ash. They talk about American ships that appear out of nowhere, about supply chains that never break, about an enemy that fights with a casualness that comes from knowing they'll never run out of ammunition. Volkov has always dismissed it as defeatist exaggeration. But now, standing in front of a mountain of trucks that America built and gave away without a second thought, now he's not so sure. The translator appears again, holding a clipboard. Sergeant Volkov, you're being reassigned. Your unit is being motorized. You'll receive vehicle training starting tomorrow. Volkov looks at the spam tin still in his hand. Then he looks at the trucks. Then he starts laughing again. But this time it's not mockery. It's the laugh of a man who's just realized he's been fighting on the winning side all along and never knew why until now. February 1944. Outside Vitebsk, Belarusian SSR. The Studebaker bounces over frozen ruts, its engine growling steadily through the sub-zero cold. Sergeant Dmitry Volkov sits in the passenger seat, watching the landscape blur past. Burned villages, abandoned German positions, skeletal trees clawing at a gray sky. The truck doesn't care about the cold. That's what strikes him most. Back in 41, 42, even into 43, Soviet vehicles died in winter. Engines seized, fuel lines froze, batteries cracked. The Red Army became a walking army every December, slogging through snow while their trucks sat useless along the roadside. But the Studebaker just runs. -30 degrees Celsius, and the engine purrs like it's a spring afternoon. The heater even works, warm air blasting from vents that actually blow warm air. Volkov's driver, a kid from Ukraine named Pavel, keeps grinning every time he shifts gears. It's like driving a train, Pavel says, except it goes anywhere. They're part of a convoy, 20 trucks hauling ammunition, food, and replacements toward the front. Before Lend-Lease, this same trip would have taken a week and cost half the cargo to breakdowns and ambushes. Now they'll make it in 2 days, and every vehicle will arrive intact. Volkov watches another Studebaker pass in the opposite direction, heading back toward the supply depot. Empty, ready to be refilled, sent forward again. The cycle never stops. The Americans have turned warfare into an assembly line. Raw materials in one end, victory out the other. He pulls out a letter from his pocket. It arrived 3 days ago from his brother-in-law, a Wehrmacht prisoner captured during the Korsun-Cherkasy pocket. The censors let it through because it contained no military intelligence, just observations. Volkov reads it again, even though he's memorized every word. Dmitry, they gave me steak today. Actual beef, with potatoes that weren't rotten and vegetables I couldn't identify. I thought it was a trick. Soften us up before interrogation maybe, or fatten us before a show trial. But then I talked to the guards, Americans, through a translator who spoke better German than I do Russian, and they told me this is what they eat every day. This isn't special treatment for prisoners. This is their standard ration. I didn't believe them, so I watched, and God help me, it's true. The American guards eat the same food we do. Better even, they get fresh fruit we don't see. They complain about the quality, Dmitry. They complain that the steak is too tough, that the bread isn't fresh enough. I've seen soldiers throw away half a meal because they weren't hungry. Throw it away. I thought about the winter of 42. Do you remember? When we ate the horses, when the supply trains stopped coming and we boiled tree bark for soup. I watched men die of starvation while holding loaded rifles, and these Americans are throwing away food. That's when I understood. We've already lost. Not because they're better soldiers, they're not. Not because their tactics are superior, they're adequate at best. We've lost because they have so much that they don't know what to do with it all. I asked one of the guards where the food comes from. He said Kansas. I asked where Kansas is. He laughed and said it's one state, one of 48, and it grows enough wheat to feed half of Europe. One state, Dmitri. How do you fight that? Volkov folds the letter carefully. His brother-in-law is right, but he's also wrong, because the Americans are feeding Soviet soldiers the same way they're feeding German prisoners. The spam, the white bread, the canned fruit, it all seemed like a joke in Murmansk, decadent capitalist excess. But now Volkov understands what it really is, a message. Every truck, every can of spam, every pair of boots. It's America saying, we have so much that we can give it away. We have so much that equipping an entire foreign army is barely an inconvenience. We're not even fighting you yet, Germany, and we're already outproducing your entire industrial base. The psychological impact is devastating. Volkov has interrogated dozens of German prisoners over the past few months. The ones captured in 41 and 42 were arrogant, defiant, certain of victory. The ones captured in 43 were tired but professional. But the ones captured in 44, they're broken, not because of Soviet tactics or Katyusha rockets, but because they've seen the trucks. They've seen entire Soviet divisions that were walking in 1942, suddenly mechanized, mobile, and capable of maneuvers the Red Army could never achieve before. We're fighting two enemies, one German officer told Volkov. The Russians in front of us, and the Americans behind them. And the Americans aren't even here yet. Pavel swerves around a crater, bringing Volkov back to the present. You think we'll make Berlin? The kid asks. Volkov looks at the convoy stretching ahead. 20 American trucks carrying Soviet soldiers toward Germany, fueled by American gasoline, maintained with American spare parts, eating American rations. Yes, he says, we'll make Berlin. Now it's just mathematics, and America has more numbers than Germany ever imagined possible. April 1944. Prisoner of war camp, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Oberleutnant Friedrich Becker stands in the mess hall line, tin tray in hand, trying to process what he's seeing. The American serving the food drops a portion of mashed potatoes onto his tray, then roasted chicken, then green beans, then a bread roll, then a piece of apple pie. Becker stares at the pie. Keep moving, Fritz, the American says, not unkindly. Becker sits at a long wooden table with other German officers, all captured during the Italian campaign. None of them are eating yet. Major Klaus Zimmermann finally breaks the silence. This is more food than my entire company received in a week in Sicily, he says quietly. Becker thinks about the bread in the Wehrmacht field rations. Kommissbrot. Dense, dark, designed to last weeks. It was functional, designed by a nation that understood logistics with Teutonic precision. But this is abundance. This is a military that doesn't have to choose between quality and quantity because it can afford both. I asked the guard about the food, Zimmermann says. He said this is standard prisoner ration, same as what they give their own troops in training. Impossible, someone mutters. That's what I said. Zimmermann takes another bite. So he showed me the supply depot. They have multiple warehouses, each one the size of a city block, full of food. And the guard told me that they throw away expired rations. They don't even try to use them. They just dispose of them. Silence around the table. Becker is an engineer by training. He understands numbers. If American prisoner rations are this good, if they can afford to feed enemy soldiers fresh chicken and apple pie, what does that say about their overall production capacity? He thinks about the bombing campaigns. Each B-17 costs approximately 200,000 Reichsmarks to produce. America is building them at a rate of hundreds per month. He thinks about the Liberty ships. German U-boats were supposed to win the Atlantic by sinking vessels faster than the Allies could build them, but American shipyards are launching new ships every 3 days. Becker sets down his fork. The mathematics are clear. Germany is fighting an enemy that has industrialized warfare itself. We can't win, he says aloud. Zimmerman looks at him. No, we never could. No, Zimmerman agrees, but we didn't know that. Not really. Not until we saw it ourselves. September 1944, Willow Run, Michigan. German POWs stand in an observation gallery, looking down at the assembly line below. Becker is among them, pressing against the glass. The factory floor is almost a mile long, a single assembly line running through the entire building, and on that line, B-24 Liberator bombers are taking shape, not one at a time, but in continuous succession. A guide, an American civilian who speaks German, points out various features. Willow Run produces one B-24 every 63 minutes, he says. That's approximately 400 bombers per month from this single facility. Becker does the math. 400 bombers per month from one factory. Germany's entire aircraft production is roughly 3,000 planes per month. This one American factory is producing more than 10% of Germany's total monthly output. And Becker knows Willow Run is not the only factory. How many factories, he asks. The smile smiles. Dozens of major plants, Boeing, Douglas, Consolidated, North American, Grumman, Republic, Lockheed. A younger officer asks, how is this possible? The workers are... He doesn't finish, but the implication is clear. The factory floor is full of women, not men, women, wearing overalls and wielding rivet guns with practiced efficiency. The men are overseas fighting, so the women build the planes, the guide says simply. Becker watches a team of 3 women install an engine. They work with choreographed precision. The entire operation takes less than 4 minutes. In German factories, that same job requires 5 experienced mechanics and takes 20 minutes. These women are housewives, secretaries, teachers, trained in a matter of weeks. It's not brilliant. It's not elegant. It's just inevitable, like watching a glacier move. I understand now, Zimmerman says quietly in the cafeteria later, why they feed us so well, why they show us the factories. It's not kindness, it's a message. They want us to tell everyone. They want German soldiers to know that surrender isn't death, it's steak and apple pie and warm beds. It's the most effective propaganda I've ever seen because it's just the truth. Becker looks through the window. Another B-24 rolls off the line. 63 minutes since the last one. Right on schedule. May 1945. Outside Berlin. Sergeant Dmitry Volkov stands on the hood of his Studebaker, watching the city burn. The truck brought him here, across Belarus, through Poland, all the way to the gates of the Reich. Artillery rumbles in the distance. Soviet Katyushas, mounted on American Studebaker chassis, scream rockets into German positions. A German convoy tries to retreat down the Charlottenburg Chaussee. Horse-drawn wagons, a few battered trucks running on synthesized fuel. Volkov's unit doesn't even engage them. They just wait. Soviet T-34s are flanking from the north, mechanized and mobile. The German convoy is surrounded within 15 minutes. They surrender without firing a shot. Volkov watches as his lieutenant processes the prisoners. They look like ghosts. One of them, an older soldier, stares at Volkov's truck. Amerikanische, he spits. Volkov nods. Yes, American. The German laughs bitterly. We were told you were fighting alone, that Lend-Lease was propaganda. They weren't stories. Volkov offers him a lucky strike. The German takes it, hands shaking. We could have won in 41 or 42 if it had just been the Soviet Union. We were grinding you down. Yes, Volkov agrees. But then you had more of everything, more than we could count, more than we could survive. The German flicks ash. I was at Kursk in 43. We had the best tanks and the best crews, but you kept coming. We'd destroy a battalion and another would appear. We'd break through one line and there were 3 more behind it. We spent everything at Kursk, and when it was over, we'd lost because you had more. Pavel approaches with a canteen. What happens now? He asks. Volkov shrugs. We occupy, rebuild, go home eventually. You think America will let us keep Germany? Volkov thinks about the trucks, the planes, the food. Stalin likes to talk about the superiority of the socialist system, but Volkov knows that without American aid, the Soviet Union would have fallen. The mathematics are clear. I think, Volkov says carefully, that America will do whatever America wants, and we'll have to accept it. Pavel frowns. Even though we're the ones who bled for this? Yes, Volkov says, even though. Because production capacity matters more than sacrifice. The truck engine starts immediately. Reliable. American. 400,000 of them, plus the spam, the fuel, and the boots that turned a dying army into an unstoppable juggernaut. Volkov thinks about the letters, the ones describing American abundance, the most effective propaganda ever created because it's just math.